Silent scan. Silent scan.
Defiance.
Bants and Bants.
You can't control us.
Bants and
A frightening dystopia.
Bants and Bants.
Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Open your eyes.
Bants and
An alternate reality. We begin as wanderers, and we are wanderers still.
Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of Bombs and Bants. I'm John.
I'm Mark.
And I'm the missus.
The first thing I want to talk about is that YouTube has changed the rules. They noted that yesterday, this is a few days ago, was the official safe harbor deadline for the presidential election. And they were going to remove any piece of content uploaded today or anytime after that misleads people by alleging that widespread fraud or errors change the outcome of the 2020 U.S. presidential election. So what they're saying is they are going to remove any content that doesn't agree with their set of facts. And I, for one, applaud YouTube because this is the best thing they could have done, because no one could ever say that Joe Biden wasn't the president.
He totally won fair and square.
There absolutely was zero cheating.
Nope. No, it's all legitimate. The software especially has proven to be very robust that was used in those Dominion machines.
Yes,
Very robust.
Robust.
100% reliable.
All right.
Got our bases covered now, don't we?
Yeah. So let's continue onward. This episode, we have 3 stories. I'll start off talking about an article that described a book called What to Expect When No One's Expecting, America's Coming Demographic Disaster. The missus will spend some time on Christmas wrapping.
A lot of time, because I need a lot of preparation and quiet and alcohol to do that.
And then Mark will discuss Where Did America Go Wrong? It's an article from Der Spiegel. Oh, there's a new sponsor.
Is it really Jeff Bezos this time? Please tell me it's Jeff Bezos.
It's not Jeff Bezos.
SpaceX?
No. Close.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Close.
Can we get free rides?
It's close to SpaceX. It is the Flat Earth Society.
Flatter?
Flat Earth Society. Flat, like your head.
This is a family-rated program, so I won't, share the sign language I just sent to you.
All right. So moving on. So we'll have that commercial coming up. But we'll start off with Nick Gillespie on What to Expect When No One's Expecting, America's Coming Demographic Disaster. And I first saw this article linked to from Mark's website. I believe all of these were first linked to from Mark's website. And I'll note that this particular article came from 2013. So it came from the distant past.
When times were different.
When times were different, before the Great Plague set upon us all. And the fascinating thing is Nick Gillespie 100% bought into the idea that fertility in the United States was going to go down. There's going to be a demographic disaster because there's no way ever to change it. So is he right? Strangely, taking our time machine from 2013 to 2018, we find that Hungary in 2018 did subsidies to families with children. They got up to $36,000 for just to help buy a house. With 3 kids, the subsidies could be between $50,000 and $80,000. With 2 kids, the subsidies were between $18,000 and $30,000. In Hungary, the average wage is $11,000 per year. So this is pretty significant sort of subsidy. And you'll never guess what? The minute that they started subsidizing children, people started having more. It's not like they forgot the recipe. So lo and behold, incentives change people's minds. My thought in general is the main problem in the United States is there are a lot of 20-something urban women who make PowerPoints for $50,000 a year and then learn to like wine and cats.
As long as they aren't smelly cats.
As long as they aren't smelly cats.
And for our listeners who are unaware, we're sitting here recording this podcast tonight in the presence. Even though he is not to be seen, he can be smelled. He is somewhere in the room. There he is. I spotted him.
Yeah.
It's not a Tasmanian devil seal slipper this time.
So that was the commentary I had on that particular Reason article. It's interesting to look at these articles back from the past and understand that their conceptions of what the reality is going to be, it can be really, really skewed, especially when no one's really tried to put any incentives together for people to have some more children.
It's interesting to go back even further when we had the population bomb that everyone was afraid of. The Earth was just going to be overwhelmed with billions and billions of people. A lot of our elites still operate under that assumption that population is just going to grow out of control, and it's not going to happen. But yeah, getting back to what you said though about Hungary subsidizing and having that work out, that's a little surprising. I hadn't read about that. I know most countries have actually failed at trying to boost their populations. People have looked at the demographic problem. I'll just point out, if you can find it maybe online, there's a documentary called The Demographic Winter, which goes into this. But, essentially they come to the conclusion the only population groups that are actually increasing are people that are very religious. Every other country where how religious people are is declining, they see population decline. Some of the other factors that go into population decline are education of women. More educated a woman is, the less likely she is to have children. And I think what your Hungary example can be used maybe to support. My suspicion is that children, at one time people had them because children were economically beneficial, provided a workforce essentially for the household. They don't do that anymore. I can hardly get my kids to take the garbage out. Children in many ways are a luxury, and it's a luxury that frankly a lot of people really can't afford. And I think that's a big part of why people can't have or aren't having children today.
Mark, you raised some great points. One of the things that I'll bring up is the interesting propaganda we keep seeing on this type of story. On one hand, we can to make enough babies. Oh no, the population is collapsing. But that's a good thing. And then there's the, hey, live the child-free life. And of course, don't forget the propaganda of you are a young woman. The only way that you're of value to society is if you're making PowerPoints for $50,000 a year in an urban setting.
And this goes into my feeling on this, and it ties right into what you said, John. And that is that I think a lot of it is self-centeredness within our culture. And it also ties to what you said, Mark, about the less religious a society is, the less they have children. And I think that's a large part of it. When your first and foremost thing that you're always and ever thinking about is yourself and how to meet your own needs and reach your own goals and fulfill your own wishes in society. We all have kids here. We know that that's a full-time job, and it's a tough one at that. And the more kids you have, the tougher it is.
If Pugsley would have been our first child, he would have been our last child.
Pugsley was a tough kid. But back in the 70s, and I think this started, in the 70s, you talk about women being more educated and working more. And I feel that I can discuss this without being called a misogynist since, I am a woman and I was born that way too, by the way, have been for the entire life. But anyway, because the pill was the first generation of babies that people took the pill not to have. And it led to the smallest generation in American history, which is Generation X, of which I am a part. And also there was a book that came out in 1978, which was a parenting guide. And it was called Ourselves and Our Children. And the title of that book essentially tells you in what order of importance you should place parts of your family. And it's out of print now. You can't find it. But this is actually a quote from the book, from their website. This is a book about the lives and needs of parents. Consider yourself, the authors urge. That's from their website. So put yourself first. And I think that's a big part of it. Mm-hmm. And I just remembered this because I looked down at my notes and saw it. And it deals with the letter that Gillespie had at the end of that from Chris Lehman, who was the author of someplace called Book Forum. So it was just laced with obscenity, right? So my first question is, why can't lefties do anything without dropping numerous and copious amounts of the F-bomb?
Right.
Now, I personally have a great love for that word, but there are times when it's unprofessional and inappropriate, right? The second thing is why can't they utter a sentence without bringing up Charles Koch? He was mentioned in that letter, right? Do they have their mommies check under their beds at night in order to make sure he's not hiding there? So the reason I bring this up, and the only reason I bring this up, and let me pull it up here. And let me screen share this with you, Mark.
That is hilarious.
Well, that's our first segment. And now we have a word from our sponsor.
Hi.
Hi. How can I help you?
I'd like to talk to you about the flat Earth.
Flat Earth? I thought it was a globe. A sphere.
No, silly. The Earth is flat. Haven't you ever seen a map?
Why, sure I have.
How do you think they made maps? In printers? Printers only print flat things, so the Earth must be flat. How else do you explain maps?
Well, it's just me, but aren't maps an entirely two-dimensional approximation of a three-dimensional surface?
That's what the man wants you to think. The Earth is flat.
What about mountains?
They don't exist either. The world is flat, like Nebraska, or like Pamela Anderson before her surgery.
Well, now that you mention it, I never thought about it that way.
Excellent. Now you'll be with me when I say there was no voter fraud in the 2020 election. Repeat after me. There was no voter fraud.
There was no voter fraud. There was no voter fraud. There was no voter fraud.
Brought to you by the committee to get enough votes so that it appears that Joe Biden won the election. Kamala Harris, treasurer.
Awesome.
You see what I do before I write my blog posts. And now we move on to the misses on how to wrap presents like a professional.
Well, I'll start off by telling you this. If you want to know how to wrap presents like a professional, I am not your expert source of information. That's not the case. However, I did go to this article from the Mail Online that was indeed called How to Wrap Presents Like a Professional. Mom wows her very simple tricks that make her Christmas gifts of all shape and sizes look incredible. And you can follow the link and go to the website. There is a video there of how to do this. So I, gentle listeners, took it upon myself to see if I could do this. And here's the result. Okay, so here we go. We're going to try this nifty new wrapping thing, right? That's in the article. And I have things here, a thing to wrap, kind of square, not an odd shape, shouldn't be too hard. I have wrapping paper, and as you can see, this is how the people who live in my house put wrapping paper up when they're done with it, so that might be a bit of a challenge. Next I have tape. Tape. Okay, we need tape. Okay, so I found tape. Granted, it's not Scotch tape. I live in the house with 3 guys, my husband and sons. So, you know, this is probably as close as I'm going to get with some clear packing tape. Okay, now we're all ready here to start doing the wrapping. Oh, wait. Except for the fact that I need scissors. Scissors. Okay, hang on. Okay, so we're in the kitchen where scissors might normally be. Let's see if we have any. That's where they should be. They are not there. Nope. Bunch of knives. It's my favorite drawer, but no scissors in there either. Okay, hang on. Okay, last chance for scissors. Hey! Scissors. Okay, so here, after finally finding my scissors and cutting paper and a dog in the background with a squeaky toy once again, we're now ready to try this wrapping technique seen in the videos. The first thing we do is fold over. I have pre-taped, as you can see, and then we're supposed to, I don't know, make little wings or... Okay, well, that's clearly not it. All right, here we go. Try it again. Take 2. The little... See, this is why I don't do origami. All right, I'm going to do these little wings. You know what? I'm just going to wrap it the same way everyone else in the house wraps their gifts, which looks like this. Merry Christmas! So here was my first thing that I found suspicious about this, is that the author of this encourages you to find some sort of stylish wrapping paper to start with, and they say, ideally, some plain brown paper because it looks so stylish.
Where does brown paper look stylish?
Australia.
Oh, maybe we shall talk like this. I might.
All right then, I understand that. So as you can see from the video, my efforts at doing this, I don't know, geometrically impossible way to wrap gifts I think unless you are a professional at origami, this cannot be done. Not by humans. This person is an alien
So
from
one,
space.
so one time at work, we had a secret Santa gift giving.
Oh no.
And so I had to buy something, and it had to be less than some ludicrous amount of money. So I brought just the most awful present possible. I think it might have been a plastic slinky. I mean, there's nothing even wonderful about a plastic slinky unless you're 5.
And it's always like $5.
And
what can you buy for $5?
Yes. And so I wrapped it up myself using green Santa paper that was kind of crinkly to begin with and duct tape.
And I think you'll see from the video why the paper was crinkly to begin with.
Yes, that predates the missus, actually.
But the important thing here is that you did it with your own little bitty hands.
Yes, but the thing is, my boss of all people said, "Well, that's from." I bet he picked something pretty nice and just wrapped it up like that on purpose. Boy,
and now expectations are set.
Boy, was he disappointed.
To be followed by an awkward silence.
But not as disappointed as many people are going to be, because I'd heard a rumor that it had been so cold and there had been so much moisture at the North Pole that this year in 2020, Santa was in isolation. Isolation.
Oh.
But the good news is, I heard he also developed some Santa bodies. In our final segment for tonight, we have Mark talking about the article from Der Spiegel, Where Did America Go Wrong?
Ah, yes, there we are. The Germans telling us where we went wrong. I'll start off by noting that we never invaded France, but nor have we invaded Russia. Okay.
Well, no, we actually did invade Russia in 1919.
Yes, that's right. I do remember. We did not throw our entire military effort into invading Russia to take Moscow. I'll rephrase it. So, yeah, they tried a Napoleon and it didn't work again. But I guess that's what happens when you follow a method of warfare that depends on motor vehicles when your army is mostly using horses still. This is an interesting article. Obviously, this is coming from a European. I don't know whether he considers himself leftist, but he certainly is a leftist from our perspective. He goes through and talks about all the horrible things that have happened in America and focuses in on, and I have to say he's citing to a different article, but basically he focuses in on the lack of trust in the society. Social trust, and in that he's referring to a David Brooks article, which I mentioned more in my blog. But he writes in the essay, Brooks cites Samuel P. Huntington, one of the great political thinkers of the 20th century, who concluded that moral convulsions happen every 60 years in American history, and they are always accompanied by the same symptoms: loss of trust in institutions, widespread moral indignation, contempt for the elite, a moralistic young generation with new means of communications dominating the debate, and marginalized groups that have previously been excluded taking control. I'm not sure if that's a list of symptoms or a wish list. The loss of trust in institutions, though, is frankly, I think, what leads to the contempt of the elite and moral indignation. Obviously, this last election has shown us how our institutions can rise to the occasion, but that's why people have a loss of trust in institutions, at least. But there's more to it. I mean, he talks about social trust and cohesion indicators. And one of the things I thought was interesting, this author doesn't mention it, neither does the other article from the Atlantic, but one of the key findings from this Harvard sociologist, Putnam, who he did a study and discovered, quite to his horror, in fact, he actually didn't publish his research for some years because of it, but he found that the greater diversity, and by this we're talking ethnic and racial diversity, greater diversity led to less social trust, which I think is one of the most underappreciated things that's ever been said, because we have essentially all these leftists complaining, why does the U.S. have so little trust? Nobody wants to address the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about that. The real reason, I mean, they'll come up with fake reasons, and they like to pick on white working class as being the white working class are dinosaurs and they can't adapt to the new society or culture. But
it's fascinating that the people who are so in favor of inclusion have to pick a bogeyman. They have to pick someone or some group itself to alienate and to point at.
Yes. They do. Obviously, Trump is the focus of it right now. For instance, in this article, he says, "What triggered this crisis of confidence? Where did society, politics, and culture take a turn so wrong that it ultimately wound up with Trump, 20,000 lives, and street battles in a pandemic?" As if Germany has somehow avoided all the street battles.
It's nice when Germany tries to lecture us on morality, right?
Oh, yeah.
Part of what I took away from this is a German leftist comes to America, talks to other leftists in America, and he's sad that it's not uniformly leftist. I mean, that's what I walked away after reading this article, because everyone he talks to is to one degree or another leftist, from my opinion. You mentioned David Brooks. Here's something that someone from the left wrote about David Brooks. This was in GQ. It was a piece by a person by the name of Drew Margery. I hope I pronounced that wrong. He said, "I have a certain morbid admiration for New York Times columnist and human mayonnaise spill David Brooks. I don't know where the secret is to obtaining such lofty standing in the bogus influencer economy that you get to spend the bulk of your time appearing on the Sunday morning shows, collecting hefty advances for pamphlet quality books, racking up monstrous fees on the lecture circuit, and drawing a hefty salary from the Times for columns that don't even get edited. All I know is that I want in. I want the keys to the club where con artists like Brooks and Tom Friedman and George Will and Ariana Huffington and the like can all gather together to address the state of things and feast on human infants." That's from the left.
Well, and my favorite part of this article, one of them, I'll get to my second here in a moment, but my first favorite article was when he's talking about the book Hillbilly Elegy. And he says, "In New York, we all rushed out to buy Hillbilly Elegy for the background it provided on these backwaters." Well, golly, Phil, did it ever occur to you that those of us here, those hicks in these backwaters, we can actually read some too. And we might actually be able to understand what you just said about us. And that might breed a little distrust on our part. I don't think it probably has ever occurred to him.
Well, and it's a constant misreading, and it's a constant misunderstanding, I think, at least of some basic parts of American society. Going back to Brooks, he talks about, the current generation grew up in a world in which institutions failed, financial systems collapsed, and the families were fragile. And of course, here's what Brooks thinks is going to happen. Not liberation, but security. Not freedom, but equality. Not individualism, but the safety of the collective. Not sink or swim meritocracy, but promotion on the basis of social justice. And I've got to tell you, there's probably somewhere between 70 and 100 million people in this country who are going to be, no, I'll take a hard pass on that one.
And so I had that in my notes too. And my first reaction to that passage was, pardon me for a minute while I go punch a millennial. And secondly, that Stalin finally turned Germany into communists.
You mean Frau Merkel?
I don't want to assume gender.
Frau Merkel?
Yeah, there's just a lot of contempt in this Der Spiegel article from Philip Omk. I'm not even sure I can pronounce his name. To me, that's what bothers me about the article. He comes from the leftist point of view. If you're not leftist, you're an idiot.
Well, on that note, we'll be back next week with another edition of Bombs and Bants. And thank you for listening. I'm John.
I'm Mark.
And I'm the missus.
Take care.
Y'all come back now, you hear?